worried about our kids. Kids at school, they're hearing about this climate hysteria. They're hearing about COVID-19. And I mean this as a serious observation. There is a PTSD aspect to this. People are going to be traumatically stressed, and the lack of trust that Nick talks about is a real thing. Our kids don't deserve this sort of rubbish that they're getting on a daily basis, and the uncertainty about whether the jab works or it doesn't. News out of Britain about a third jab. You just know this thing's not going away anytime soon. We're just going to get on with our life, Bronwyn.
Well, yes, Gary, we do. And I've been saying we need to hear the truth, but that means we need to know the facts. Let me spell that out. Of the people who've recovered, had the disease and recovered, how many of them have recovered absolutely? How many of them have any residual things that are going on still? What is the nature of them? What are the ages of the people who have residuals, if any? Who are the people, and if you've had the disease, does that make you immune from it? Do you then need to be vaccinated? Or if you have, in fact, been in a cluster, can we please know, out of the 124 cases in New South Wales, for instance, I think that's the number, how many of those are households? And if they're not households, how many in that house didn't get it? I mean, the man who's supposed to be the culprit for spreading all of this, we're told we're to believe that he went into a cafe and walked past a woman who was 70 and she got the disease. And he apparently gave it to somebody else in the cafe, and that's what did it. And yet none of his family got it. And he was with them for, 5 hours before he was isolated. So there are too many things that have been glossed over that we don't know about. And we really have to, I think, be told the truth so that people can put aside their worries about the vaccine and make a decision that's based on fact. So now we're going to go on and discuss this new 4-point plan to get out of the quagmire we're in. But so help me, Gary, it's not a solution. We saw the extraordinary thing of a Liberal Prime Minister band together with Labor premiers and abandon the Liberal Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, who wanted to keep people coming into the country and could cope with it.
I know.
But no, the price was to halve the number of people, Australians who can come home, in return for an agreement in principle to the 4-point plan, but it's got no guts. It doesn't tell us what percentage of people have to be vaccinated before the 4-point plan can come into operation. So the premiers will make that decision. So what is it? 1 step forward and 2 steps back? It just makes no sense at all, because now the Prime Minister has exposed himself that if that plan fails, it's all his fault.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bernie, this is the point. The National Cabinet today essentially said we're all to go to our rooms until we get the vaccination. That's basically what they've said. They're going to halve the number of people coming back into Australia. This is to appease Anastasia Palaszczuk and Mark McLeod over in Western Australia. Now, Palaszczuk, or the Polish pronunciation is Palaszczuk. She's been running around like a Palaszczuk with a head chopped off all week over this whole thing. She herself is about to head off to Japan. Well, I reckon if you're in the touring party with Anastasia, are you going to draw straws? Because which half of the touring party is not coming back? Which half of the Olympic athletes, Bernie, are not coming back? Is it only going to be the gold medalists that are coming back? I mean, this thing is as clear as custard, what's come out of National Cabinet today.
Well, that's a bit like China. Only the winners come back, or only the winners are heard of again. Anyway, look, I think the Prime Minister has made a very, very grave error of judgment. He trusted the Labor premiers to put the health needs of Australians ahead of politics. Now, that's something that they are incapable of doing. And what concerns me is that what we are seeing in Australia at the moment is near identical to what we saw in the United States last year, where Democrat states caused all end of mayhem over this virus and sheeted it home to Trump. and of course it cost him dearly in November. And we're seeing exactly the same thing happen here in Australia. The Labor states are causing no end of trouble, and they're all blaming it on ScoMo. I suppose to an extent it's his own fault because he believed them, but he's got to stop it. He's got to stop it because they can't be believed. Our bloke here in Victoria, I suppose, is the ringleader, and all he breathes, all he eats is politics. It doesn't matter about anything else. It's all about politics for him, and that's what we're seeing in Australia right now. And my very great concern is that if we continue down this path, it doesn't matter what ScoMo does on any other major issues. He's going to be sunk by what the Labor state governments have done and have made him responsible for.
Yeah, they've got him by the proverbials. I mean, Daisy Cousins, I mean, you live here in Brisbane these days. I mean, you're from Sydney, your family's highly connected in Sydney. You understand, that broader picture, but Daisy, the Premier, Palashuk, and I'm not trying to be a smarty, that is the proper Polish pronunciation, running around like a Palashuk with a head chopped off all this week. You've got this poor woman who's about to become the Governor of Queensland, who's currently the Chief Health Officer. And what did the Courier Mail say today? Cho, Chief Health Officer, Cho has to go. This person's about to become the Governor of Queensland. She's got the worst possible start, given that she's now continuing to be the political human shield for another 4 months before she becomes Governor of Queensland. We've got people who are 18, we must never let them die of blood clots, but people over 60, I mean, the whole thing this week has been riddled with just complete madness, Daisy, and small business, well, David Crisafulli, the opposition leader, is the only person who's actually stood up and said small business needs a break. Anastasia's excuse tonight is, it's a worldwide pandemic, we can't help small business in Queensland. Daisy, I can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, look, it's been an extraordinary week, hasn't it, in Australian politics? Madness is a word you could use for it. I would just use immaturity. I think the way that Anastasia Palaszczuk, shall we say, Stephen Miles and Jeanette Young have behaved in their press conferences over the last couple of days is appalling. It has been a blatant attempt by Queensland Labor to whack the federal Liberal government with a stick because they know very well there's an election coming up, and as Bernie Finn so brilliantly put it, they're following the Democrat model, which is, throwing stones at the feds in an attempt to pin all the COVID woes on them, when really it's actually their fault. The problems that have happened in Queensland came under Queensland jurisdiction. It's their issue, vaccinations and COVID leaks, etc. Look, it was interesting listening to Scott Morrison lay out his plan today. I'm incredibly cynical about it because I remember last year in August, Scott Morrison was roundly caned for saying on the radio that he would make the COVID vaccine as mandatory as possible. After the backlash, he backed down and said, oh, no, there'll be no mandates or anything like that. Well, guess what? This 4-point plan is exactly what he said he was going to do in August last year, which was make the vaccine as mandatory as possible. The premiers have been laying into us with the stick over the last month in terms of lockdowns, and now Scott Morrison has come out with the carrot. The only way that you're going to be able to travel again, to open your small business, to not be under house arrest, to be able to see your loved ones is if you get the jab. That's the only way you can do it. You need this cap, that cap, the other cap, the jab, the jab, the jab. That's what all of this emphasis is on. What if you don't want to get the jab? Why should you have to put something into your body that you don't want to put, particularly for a virus where the death rate is incredibly low? It's around 1%. Like 80% of cases, according to the World Health Organization, will be mild to asymptomatic, for goodness sake, and we know perfectly well who the virus is most likely to kill, and it's the elderly and people with other underlying health problems. I'm sorry, but this is just a very tacit way to make the vaccine mandatory and expand these massive government powers for what sounds like, if you listen to the plan, at least another year and a half. I'm disgusted with the whole way this is going, and the only good thing I can actually draw from that press conference today was that finally the politicians are actually admitting that COVID can, in fact, be treated like the flu and not like this terrible flesh-eating monstrous virus they've been portraying it as. So I'm particularly annoyed with the whole situation, and I'm thrilled I got to come on the show tonight to have a chat about it.
Well, good on you, Daisy. I mean, let's face it, the Prime Minister did say that somewhere down the track, this thing is going to be just going to be like a flu, which is what John Ruddock was saying a year ago, and everyone piled onto him and said he was irresponsible. But maybe John Ruddock was right. I'll give him a shout out. I'll probably over-encourage him for saying that. But the point is, it's not Ebola. It's not a case of if you get it, you're going to die, because as Daisy said, it's a bit like it's a % or less. And you know, as Richard Ralph Smith said, you're more likely to get killed in a car accident getting to the doctors than anything to do with the jab. So the jab's probably not a problem.